Thank you very much for doing this. Thanks for your time.
Hmm.
The first question is there anything you've learned recently in the game? Any skills, any maybe tricks, or anything else you're working on right now or learned recently?
Yeah, I would say the two biggest things I've been focusing on is using the op more. In the past, I used the Seiko a lot more. However, I found that I'm just able to get more shots off like consistently with the op. In addition to the fact that you just get more damage off the op. The other big thing, and I think a lot of players are starting to recognize this. This is particularly true in competitive, but this advice applies to like whenever you see somebody good in a lobby, I recommend picking up grenades. I used to not really use grenades much at all. But the grenades are just incredibly good, especially if you have if you're carrying two grenades and let's say you have a teammate also carrying grenades. If there's a really good
Mhm.
player in the lobby, what will often happen is like if you just place the grenades in like the right spot with good timing, they have nothing they can do. They can't outbuild against like four grenades or even two for like a lot of the time, right? So I think whenever you see somebody good in the lobby, my recommendation is just use. They're so good.
Interesting. Do you used to, like you said, four or two grenades? Do you usually throw two grenades at the same time?
Yes. Well, so if especially if your teammate is also using grenades, it's a good idea to throw the grenades at the same time with them. This is particularly true if you're going up against a squad where they're like grouped up a lot. And again, this advice is really applicable like if you're in a lobby with a lot of other good players. So I play a lot of competitive, and grenades. Just the general trend is like people are using them more and more. So you'll often have situations where a team is just stuck in a spot and what you got to do in those situations, especially if they're relying on hardcover, you can throw the grenades over, whatever hardcover they're using on, and there's just not a whole lot they can do. It'll break their builds, and it'll just do so often. But in public games, yes, if you see a good team in there, it's a good idea to just carry grenades with you. Especially like, I mean, it pisses me off whenever people do it, but pin dropping, I hate doing that. I hate it when people do it against me, but it's really effective. Carrying it like two grenades with you.
Yeah, I died a couple of times because of that, specifically to
Yeah.
grenades.
Yep. They're very
Um,
unpredictable too, because it's like there's certain parts of the map where you think you'll be safe from them, but they'll even go through like certain hardcover, through walls or roofs or things like that occasionally.
oh, interesting. I've never noticed that.
Yes. Yeah, there's certain parts of the map where I have to avoid because of that. Because so there's like some buildings in Frontier where it's like they can go through the roofs of the buildings. So
Oh, this
occasionally,
is
if I
super
see
useful
somebody
tip.
there, I'll you can take advantage of that, and it's pretty cheesy, but just how it works right now.
Nice. I didn't know that. Thank you very much for sharing.
Yeah.
If you had a choice of picking a zone grenade or two frag grenades, do you usually have a kind of a preference, or does it depend on the
Yeah, I do.
situation?
So I mean, it's situational. I think like towards like the very end game, if somebody is like grouped up in a building, zone nade is probably better. That being said, though, just in general, I'm probably going to prefer carrying two regular grenades. They break builds more easily, and you're just more likely to get more damage off with grenades. Um, the zone nade, what it's useful for, this is like the other thing. Like Excalibur is really difficult to deal with. If you have a team that you want to wipe out quickly, and they're just positioned inside like a building, it's often too risky to push in there. So that's where like a zone nade comes in real handy. So I think that's like the real use of the zone nade over the frag nades. It's just good at pushing people, getting people out of like a building. Because otherwise, like I'm not going to risk pushing inside a building. If you're playing against competent players, they'll just build all around in the building and make it super hard for you to kill them with like a shotgun. Otherwise, it's always frag grenades.
Interesting. So, do you mean zone grenades are like in general usually more useful close to the end of the game when kind of people are
Yeah,
stuck in the same place and they cannot move freely?
yeah, that's the case. In general, like a caveat here is that like when I'm playing public games, if I don't recognize anyone in the lobby, as far as like I don't see them as being that good, I'm actually just not going to use grenades. It's only when there's like really good players in the lobby where I finally find like grenades that are very useful to pick up. Because I find that like it's often just easier to kill people with guns, if they're not like super good. But when you have somebody that you're going up against who's just constantly like building and playing off hardcover and things like that, that's when I really need to start using grenades.
Interesting. I I started to use grenades recently after I played a couple of the games with Saddest Clown. So he's
Mhm.
my he's my guru now, grenade guru.
Right. Yeah.
Um, I found that, like, first of all, grenades can be out of the jail card, and they can be completely
Yes.
useless, or they can be a game changer.
Yes. Yeah. It's like I don't know. It's weird because sometimes it's just like completely takes up like a inventory space for like I don't know, just a waste. Sometimes they'll just throw two grenades and it does nothing, right? So there's some percentage of the time when that happens, but there's other times where it's like it does so much work for you. In competitive, that's definitely the case where, yes, sometimes I'll just throw two grenades like it did nothing. Like it might have destroyed some builds, but otherwise it did nothing.
Mhm.
Um, Other times, though, it does so much because it'll secure you a kill, and that is huge in cases, right? It's like, oh, I just did 150 to one guy and I killed another. Well, now for free, you just take out that team, and that's huge. Um, but yes, they sometimes just don't do much at all.
Nice. This is super useful. Like, one thing I noticed personally is that even, especially closer to the end of the game, even if you don't inflict any damage, kind of you still force people to
Hmm.
build, to
Yes.
hide instead of looting and healing. So even
Hmm.
that, despite any, like, there's no direct damage, it's still kind of damage through them not doing useful
Yes.
stuff.
Well, yes, to add on to that, it gives you like a little bit more time to move. Like, so what will often happen is, let's say somebody's holding some hard cover and like, they're just kind of pinning you down. When you throw those two grenades, it'll often force them to start building and freaking out. And it's in those situations you can then push forward because now, they're not going to be focused on you pushing.
And in addition to that, it feels really good when you hit someone with a grenade.
Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah. It feels really bad when you get hit by it. Like, it's like one of the most unsatisfying things, especially when it's like, what the hell? Like, I thought I built.
Do you have any strategies for kind of anti-grenade? I don't know, builds or positioning?
Uh, I mean, it's just really just down to trying to position yourself in spots where, you're not going to get grenaded as easily. Other times, it's like, yeah, a lot of times, like if I see some grenades coming in, I'll just panic build, and that works a lot of the times. It wastes some of my builds, but it still gives the enemies like a little time to push me while I'm just freaking out and building. So I guess really the counter is just position yourself in areas where it's hard for them to throw a grenade on. If you have like some high grounds or whatever, and it's just hard for them to reach you with grenades, then you'll easily avoid grenades that way. But another thing is like I guess like when possible, try not to have your team like all like grouped up like right next to each other. I think just
Mhm.
in general, it's a good idea to have at least one teammate, one or two teammates carrying some grenades. You have some teams in competitive that are their playstyles depend a lot on grenades. There's a team called NNN. They're Japanese players. I think they're relatively well known among a lot of people, especially among competitive players. And their strategy over time has shifted towards just like carrying like 6 to 8 grenades on them. So they're one of like the most annoying teams to play against. Like you'll get in a fight with them, and a lot of times they'll just waste their grenades. But a lot of times it's just like you just hear you know like all these grenades and just tick 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 tick, and it's like I can't do anything. Like that's just very frustrating. But it works a lot of times.
I tried a strategy when you actually bring some grenades. Like, for example,
Uh,
you leave your banana, you go somewhere like to loot a
yeah.
little bit more. You bring grenades, you
Mhm.
pick up banana again, and you have like extra 4 grenades in front of you just in case.
Yeah, I see. Interesting. So are you constantly? I see. Okay, so you're dropping it in an area and then going back to get like some bananas and then coming back to that area. That's not
Yes.
something I've ever really done because like a lot of the time, uh, like okay, this could work, but like if you have extra time to just sort of like camp at a spot, but a lot of the times it's like kind of risky, like moving back and forth between spots, just because you risk taking damage from other people. Again, like I'm just thinking more so in the context of like when I'm playing competitive games, like that sort of thing is like a little more difficult to do, I think. Especially if it's end zone, like if the zone's shrunk down a lot, and you have like a lot of players like sort of like densely packed in an area. I don't think that works a lot of the time. But I think like in public games, like I think you could probably do that. You could probably like settle in a spot and just like have a bunch of grenades just like on the floor sitting next to you.
Yeah, that's what
I've
I
personally
tried.
never really tried that though, but I think that could definitely work.
Interesting. Okay, I'll
Definitely,
keep
that's
trying
a
because
viable
it never
strategy.
worked for me, but I just
Yeah.
thought maybe somebody else tried that already.
Yeah, I'm not aware of anyone else really doing that like often at all. I've actually never personally tried doing that.
Like if you think about yourself maybe 6 months ago or a year ago,
Mhm.
what advice would you give to yourself? Maybe three things to do, three things to avoid.
Okay. I mean, this goes back to what I started about. So, like, probably would have told myself use the op more back then. I used the Seiko more. Um, I actually just for whatever reason back then I found the Seiko easier to use. The Seiko also, yes, it was better back then. It did 5 more damage per rarity. But I don't know. I think it would have been better if I had practiced op more back then.
Hmm.
Some other
By the
things
way,
I think.
speaking about what settings do you use? Is it 100 0, 100 0 offhand influence, and 100 motion dampening?
Yeah, it's I think what a lot of people use. I use 100% motion damping and 0% offhand influence. I think that's
Hmm.
pretty standard for like a lot of people to use. Although you have some variations. Some people use different stuff, but that's what I use. I know, like for example, Samachi, he'll like switch back and forth between like the 100% and 0% motion damping. I experimented with doing something like that. I didn't really feel like it made much sense for me, but I can understand why. Like it does. But yeah, that's just the settings I use.
Hmm. Okay, so it's practicing op more often.
Yes. Yeah.
Anything else?
As far as that, like in terms of how I play, just as I've gotten like played more and more, I just play more and more aggressive. It feels like in like specifically like public games, where oftentimes now like I use the term like a lot of players will do like what I call shopping around, where they're like before they want to take any fights, they feel like they have to go over here and grab this and that, this and that, this and that, and okay, now I'm ready to fight. Whereas like for me, a habit I've sort of developed of like just trying to like become comfortable with every weapon and just get comfortable during fights is just like at the beginning of every game, I'm often the hot drop, or if I know like I'm going to be like screwed on the hot drop, I'll hot pod. And whatever like first gun I'll find, I'll often just pick that up, whatever it is, and then just rush into teams right after. Um,
Ah,
I've
that's a very
become
good tip.
comfortable with a lot of guns, and it also like putting yourself deliberately in uncomfortable situations. I think is good at like making yourself better at the game. Because if you're always taking fights in situations you're comfortable with, I think you're not going to improve as quickly. Um, Whereas like if you're forcing yourself into these weird situations where you're pushing in situations where it's not advantageous, it forces you to like start getting really quick and like really I don't know just playing much better in general. I think when you put yourself in, whereas like the players that like at the other end of the extreme, if people just shop around the whole game until they have like 3 gold weapons in their inventory, and then they play zone the whole time, those players are not going to improve as quickly because they're not going to be seeing as much combat as often.
How did you practice that? Did you kind of deliberately picked up the weapon that you least like, or was it just situational? When you see something, you just grab it and go forward to kill someone?
So part of it was because of the people I played with. When I first started playing this game, I played with somebody called Rubix, who doesn't play as often anymore, but he's a very good player. He played very fast. That was pretty much how he started playing. So it forced me to play like that. If I wanted to get any kills, I had to play super fast. Gradually over time, I just played with like other people who play the game super fast. Past few months, I played a lot with Zoloto. She just plays really fast. So throughout the games, I'm just constantly climbing. And like if I want to get any kills, like I just have to pick up one gun and like at the beginning of the game and just rush down people. Whoop, didn't mean to. Whoa, that's weird. I have my
Mm-hmm.
trigger. I have this weird
Uh-oh.
issue with my trigger where it just like started doing that. Me break all these builds. Sometimes if
Mm-hmm.
you press the trigger like half down a little bit, it'll start doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, as far as like yeah, as far as like why I started like doing that more, a lot of it had to do with just like who I was playing with. I just play with a lot of other people who play like really fast, and that just forced me to play really fast.
Mm-hmm. And speaking about practicing different types of weapon, do you go to the training park or do you usually train inside the game?
Um, no, I don't really use the training park. I've visited there maybe 3 times. The training park, I practiced op a little bit, like specifically just practicing the reload over and over.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but otherwise, no, I don't really utilize the training park at all. It's just always in game. I spend a lot of time in the custom lobbies, particularly doing like 1v1s with people, and I feel like those can be useful for practice. But for the most part, it's just playing public games, scrims, which are also private lobbies, and then just doing some 1v1s.
Nice, interesting. I played a lot of private rooms, but not many 1v1.
Mhm.
Did you change settings, for example, for a specific weapon? took into practice something, or was it just a generic game and
Yes.
you played?
Well, so that's something I've done before. It's not something I do often, but yes, good way of practicing a gun. What you can do is you can just lower the damage of a gun, and that forces you to have to take more shots with that gun to kill somebody. And then what I'll often do is I'll turn off the guns that like are just not super useful to practice. Um, I don't really find it useful to practice like the PX4 or even the M60.
Speaking about something, I wonder if there is something you would recommend yourself not to do, maybe bad habits or
Oh
just.
yeah. Okay, yeah. Here's a bad habit. So one bad habit that like I've gotten better about is like dealing with people with the Excalibur. Like I used to think like like I can just take them on with like a DT11. I'll just push right into them. Turns out that's often not correct. If you push into a building and they have the Excalibur, especially if they know what they're doing, what they'll often do is they'll just like use their builds like within the building, like the building material, and they'll create like a little maze inside the building. So it becomes really hard to take them out with a shotgun. And then yeah, you just die. It's a problem my teammates have actually also. Like they'll just think like, I've got like a really good like DT11 or M10. Let me just push in the building. I'll take it. And then it'll just be like, and they're just dead. And they're like, oh, what the heck? Like, wasn't expecting that. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, that's the Excalibur for you. Okay, so another bad habit, using the MK18. So I use the MK18 pretty often as like a sniper replacement. Um, I say that's a bad habit because like the MK18, it's not a bad gun, but I think oftentimes like I'm just better off, and I feel like a lot of people are better off if they because like the MK18 fills like a similar niche that the sniper does in that like it's useful like at medium to long ranges. But the useful thing about the snipers is that it can really change the tide of a battle if you hit like a headshot. Like if I'm using a purple op and I get 148 damage, um, that just completely changes like how that team starts fighting because then that person has to fall back and heal up, or if they have no heals, they have to just completely back up, or they just die. Right? The MK18, it's like I might pepper them like hit them for 51, or it's more consistent damage when I use the but I feel like just a bad habit is like I'll over rely on the MK18, um, or even like over rely on the AKM at longer ranges when I probably should be using a sniper at those ranges. So I think that's like another bad habit I have.
Interesting. Do you think that comparing public games and competitive games, do you think that, for example, AWP can be more useful in competitive, but MK18 can be as good in public, or do you think like it's a generic rule that you would prefer AWP over MK18 any game in any situation?
Yeah, I think in competitive I prefer op over MK18. In public games I prefer MK18 only because in the public games I like to just play quickly. I like to just constantly just fly into enemies and just rush into enemies. It's easier to do that with the MK18. Whereas the op, you have to be a little more deliberate. You move slower when you have it out. You have to scope in. Although it is fun with the op to like just be flying and then just like taking shots in the air. So I'll do that with the op. But um, I think overall though, if you know a lobby has like good players in it, you're probably better off with the op. A lot of that also has to do with just the fact that better players tend to head peek more, and the op is like the best head peek punisher gun. If somebody keeps on peeking their head up off some hardcover, that's like an easy 132 damage of the pop or whatever. And after that, it's just devastating. It's like, oh well, they lost like a lot of their shield and HP. So I think that's just the way I think about it. I think the op is, I guess, my general way of thinking about it. The better the players in the lobby, the more likely I am to want to use the op, because it'll just punish them like way harder because they'll be head peeking so much.
Interesting. So the better players are, more grenades you need, and more often
Yes.
you use AWP.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like I play very differently if I know people in the lobby are good or bad. This even applies in competitive, where it's like even when I'm playing competitive, if even in the highest division, if I know the teams in like whatever lobby I was put in are not necessarily the top tier teams, I'll play a little differently. Like I'll carry different items, like on average. I'll carry, I'll play more aggressive, like in the competitive lobbies with less good teams. I'll use MK more often.
And speaking about the rest of the inventory wheel, so if you have weapon, by the way, how many weapons do you usually carry? Is it just two, or do you carry more?
I think generally the optimal amount is going to be between 2 and 3. I would say my optimal loadout. I have there's a few different loadouts that I consider like good loadouts, but I would say like probably just the best overall loadout if it's like I just want to get the best. It would be AKM, AWP, and DT11. There's some variation here. Like some other loadouts I think would be good. This is a loadout I use that I think works well. You can also do Seiko. Anytime it's like a Seiko or a sniper and then like a fully automatic gun. The fully auto, it could be an AKM, it can be an MP5, it can be a P90, it can even be an M60, and then a shotgun of some sort, GT11 or M10. I was talking about this earlier, like in a chat, where I was mentioning that like with the shotguns, I think you're better off using like an AKM, or for that matter, even like an MP5 or P90 over a M10 or DT. If the DT is just 1 star, it's not worth picking up. You're just better off using an AKM up close. It's going to do more damage a lot of the time. With the M10s, if it's like a white M10 shotgun or a blue one, same thing. I think you're just better off using the AKM. You can get away with 2-weapon loadouts or even a 1-weapon loadout. The AKM is so good that you can actually just get away with running an AKM, and then everything else can be health items, shield items, and utility. That's often what my teammate does in kind of Stumping Up. He likes to just run AKM a lot of the time, and then just everything else is healing items, and it works out really well. He does really good damage with it. So, yeah, for me though, I generally prefer using 2 to 3 weapons. If it's going to be 2 weapons, I will most often prefer like a fully automatic, like an AKM, and then like a DT11. So that's I also do that. So I don't know. I don't have like oh, it has to be this loadout, but like I have some just general loadouts that I like to use.
Interesting. So as far as if I understood correctly, it's basically for long range, kind of middle range, which is automatic, and super short range. It can be either shotgun or Excalibur.
Yeah. Yes. Also, the Excalibur can also be in my inventory. I'll use the Excalibur in if I'm lucky enough to find it. Like I often don't really use the Excalibur too much, but let's say it's end zone, and the end zone has like let's say the end zone's like in a refinery. Well, that's an area with like a lot of buildings that people will be in. That's a good place to have an Excalibur end game, because then if fights are going on in buildings, what you can do is you can just sort of like build like a little maze inside there. Just kind of you can bait people into buildings and be like, like, oh no, don't push me, oh no, and then they'll come in and you just like, haha, and you just take out the sword and you just slice them.
That happened to me so many times.
Yeah, that's like another thing is like sometimes like you can just get your teammates to bait somebody. Like you can just have like a teammate sort of like peek in the window, take some shots. The other team will like, oh, they're weak, push, and then like you'll be hiding like right next to the window, crouching down, and then they'll come through the window and you'll just go like, just slice them up. But yeah.
And apart from the weapon, what's your the most optimal loadout in terms of shields and health? What kind of shields? What kind of health?
Oh, yeah. So I think in terms of shields, I prefer shield sodas. Shield sodas. So if you compare the shield sodas to shield shakers, if you carry 6 shield sodas with you, I mean, just simple math here, it's 120 shield that you can heal up. 3 shield shakers is 150, so you get a little more shield from carrying the shakers. But the big advantage of the shield sodas is that you can use them during fights. The shakers is like that's not practical. If I use the shakers during fights, it's like I'm out of the fight for a couple seconds, Whereas like with the sodas, what's great about them is like if I'm fighting somebody, I can just build for like 2 seconds and then just go like, and then I'm regenerating a lot of shield quickly, and then I can just get back into the fight within like 2 to 3 seconds. So I much prefer the sodas. What I often do, as far as like my favorite like loadout in terms of like the shield items and heals, I will still carry soda or shakers. So I'll often do like 3 shield shakers, 6 sodas, 2 bananas, if I'm not carrying grenades.
Do you use health sodas at all?
Generally not, no. They can be useful, I guess, if you're like making a zone run, like if you're outside and in the red. Yeah, they can be useful, but I don't really deliberately go out of my way to carry 6 health sodas with me. I think bananas are almost always like the better option. Just getting the health off like immediately, 50 with a banana, it's just much better than sodas.
Interesting. I think it's like it's my experience as well, because especially if you have banana, you know how much health you have and how much you can expose yourself to shooting. With sodas, kind of you need to constantly pay attention to that. And there were so many cases when I just drank 6 sodas and I think I'm fine and I'm dead next second.
Yes. Yep.
How often do you play? How do you said that you don't practice in the training park, mostly in private rooms.
Mhm.
Any other kind of deliberate practice you do? Maybe you pick some weapon, maybe you practice some, I don't know, some skills.
Yeah, I think just practice that I like to do. Oftentimes, like I just try and, like I said, play as fast as I can in the public games, and I feel like that just it forces me to play faster and more efficiently. Because it's like, the margin of error is like smaller, so it's like if you're playing like that, you have to be relatively like comfortable with like the guns you're using to play like that. I play like a lot of scrims, so oftentimes like with my competitive team, a few times a week we'll play in those, and that really helps with just improving in general. You're playing against other really good players in those lobbies. 1v1s, I mentioned that. So like if you have like a friend or whoever who's like a similar skill level to you, or if they're better, it's probably actually better practice. Try and just play against them. I feel like you'll just get better doing that. Because if most of the time you're just practicing against people in like public games, um, you'll often just roll over people and you're not getting as good practice. Um, but I feel like for practicing aim, that's good. Another thing that like I do sometimes, and a lot of people do it, is they're like, okay, I'm only going to use this gun. It's like, let's say it's like, okay, I want to practice the Seiko.
And when you said you train to play fast, does it mean like you're mostly aggressive and you try to push as often as possible?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I'll just try and push as much as I can. I know, like, if I know there's good players in the lobby, that I'll change how I play a bit, right? Like, if I see really good play in there, I'm not gonna just like, okay, I'm just gonna fly right into them. I mean, first off, I generally don't just fly into people because it's like, you can get punished pretty easily doing that. But I've developed like an intuition over time where it's like you can kind of just look at a player, like how they're moving on the map for like just 2 or 3 seconds, and you can just be like, okay, there's no way this player's good. Because like you can just sometimes look at how somebody is moving, especially like how they're moving in a fight. If they're just moving in like a straight line, it's like, okay, like this person's probably not super good. But if I see somebody who's like strafing around, I'm like, okay, well, I got to be careful around this player. If I see them grabbing onto hard cover and peeking, it's like, okay, yeah, I can't just easily get away with just like rushing right into them.
That's grenade time.
Yeah, it might be grenade time. Yes, exactly. Yeah, if you see somebody play like that and building a bunch, it's like, oh, okay, well, time to get the grenades. Time to start chucking those at them.
Nice. Thank you very much. That was super useful. Super useful tips. Thanks a lot.